Hey YouTube, this is Jason again, and today I have a real treat for you guys. I am going to be reading slash ranting about a poem slash poet who is quintessential to the modernist movement, documenting the condition of the modern man and the anxiety he faces, the fragmentation and the loss surrounding the rapidly changing modern world. T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, okay? If you're an English major, you're going to have to read this poem, likely for modernism. That's when I read it, right? Makes sense. So a few things before we get into the meat and potatoes of my rant slash review. So Eliot, this poem was published in 1915. A catalyst in getting this poem published is one of Eliot's contemporaries, Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound urges him to release this. So, and Eliot is somebody who he studied at Harvard, got a bachelor's degree from Harvard, also worked on his PhD at Harvard. So this is somebody who studied Greek, Latin, ancient texts, Sanskrit, and he incorporates this into his poetry, into his literature. He wrote, and I alluded to this in my video on Yeats, he wrote Tradition and the Individual Talent. And in this, Eliot describes his view on writing poetry, in which the poet, he's very skeptical about individualism and like the eccentric poet, such as like people like D.H. Lawrence and William Blake. Rather, he considers himself a classicist when it comes to literature, a royalist politics, and an Anglo-Catholic in religion, right? So he's trying to, essentially, he believes the poet is a medium in which craftsmanship and tradition, right? An understanding of literary tradition, an understanding of cultural tradition, and a understanding of historical context. So craftsmanship and tradition come together in the poet to produce a body of work or a work that elevates talent and tradition in favor of personality. Right? The personality should disappear. The poet should almost disappear behind their work. And that's, proof, of course, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we have an imaginary character with his own wants and desires, and the allusions that are made in which, allusions to Hamlet, allusions to Andrew Marvell, to John the Baptist, to Lazarus, artists, Michelangelo, artists and history are, dead artists of the past, dead poets of the past are brought forth, and Eliot sort of disappears behind them. Of course, Einstein had a quote that, and this is not verbatim, as a lot of my references to certain literature and quotes are not verbatim, so I don't always want to preface that, have to preface when I'm pulling a quote, but Einstein said something along the lines of he could only see so far because he stood on the intellectual giants of the past, right? Or because he was standing on the shoulders of these intellectual giants of the past that carved such a nice way for him, that allowed him to see so far. So yeah. And then just, I guess, oh yes, and Eliot this becomes his work. He's recognized as merit or something by King George the Sixth, and for his contribution to the literary landscape. And he's also awarded the Nobel Prize for literature in, well, it says he was recognized in 1948. So maybe around the same time he was granted the Nobel Prize in literature. But so his work becomes a part of the very gunpowder, I guess, used to fire the literary canon. He's not even just, one of the works, a part of the literary canon. He's almost creating his own separate discourse. But, of course, it's just, he becomes a very popular figure, right? So we'll just begin with the title, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And this is what Eliot liked to do a lot of the times. He contrasts these romantic images with sort of like a dry, ironic awkwardness, or satirizes romantic images by contrasting them with this irony, by infusing irony into the mix, right? So you have, when you think of a love song, and you think of somebody like Shakespeare in his sonnets, they're written in a certain rhyme and meter, in iambic pentameter. And, like I said, they follow a certain rhyme and meter. So many syllables must be present, and they must follow that certain pattern, almost melodic, right? So that's the type of images and type of melody that is invoked when you think of the love song. But then you hear the name J. Alfred Prufrock, and it's a bit bulky. It feels out of place. It doesn't roll off the tongue. And this is done deliberately. So we have the juxtaposition of romantic imagery, romantic evocation with, I guess the awkwardness that is also precipitated by the modern condition, like this modern living in the modern world, right? And of course, like I said, this is a modernist poem. Modernism, it has to deal with documenting the condition of the modern man, having to deal with this existential dread of trying to find your footing in a rapidly changing world, dealing with loss and fragmentation, right? So yes, and then moving along to the epigraph. So the epigraph is sourced from Canto 27 of Dante's Inferno. And Eliot presents it to us in Italian. And I will read it to you here, okay? Because I have the English translation. If I thought that my reply would be to one who would ever return to the world, this flame would stay without further movement. But since none has ever returned alive from this depth, if what I hear is true, I answer you without fear of infamy. And this is from Da Montefeltro. He is the sinner who is speaking to Dante in Canto 27, down in the depths of hell. And he tells Dante, of course there is the fear of telling his story due to fear of infamy. The story behind his sins that landed him in such a place as hell. But because no one ever leaves hell, no one ever escapes from hell, he can tell his story freely. He can relay his confession to Dante. And so what this preface has to do, how it relates to the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we have Prufrock's monologue as, you know, it's a sort of confession. It's like the wandering thoughts and the anxieties of Prufrock as he, you know, tries to exist and tries to wonder, do I dare interject? Do I dare try to, you know, assume this, you know, self-importance, this self-important air, you know, do I consider myself important enough to interject and create meaning, have a meaningful conversation? So, like much of Eliot's work, it's encrypted in this type of intellectual webbing that's coded, you know, that consists of signs and symbols, which takes real labor to decode and to understand, which he will tell you that is what his poetry is all about. He'll tell you in tradition, in the individual talent, it takes real labor to gain a sense of tradition, to be able to read poetry from this time and to interpret it. And I think also what he's suggesting is you're not going to pick up on everything and even form a general understanding of the underlying message of this poem upon the initial reading. It's going to be a laborious process where you have to read and potentially reread to come up with meaning and to take something away from this other than just, you know, dismiss it as complete nonsense. And that's most certainly done intentionally. It's almost, you know, it's coded in this secret language that you have to spend time decoding. Okay, so then moving along, we'll just begin with the poem. Let us go, stanza 1. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through half-certain deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, in sawdust restaurants with oyster shells, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. So immediately, we have this romantic imagery. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, contrasted by the numbing, droning, you know, setting of that is commonplace in the modern world, like a patient etherized upon a table, right? So this could also have to do with, you know, Eliot drew a lot of inspiration from the metaphysical poets who, sorry, to back up even. Eliot, it could be that Prufrock is, you know, he's walking along, he sees the evening sky, he recognizes its beauty. But as the poem progresses, you'll see, he can't connect with women. That's certainly an insecurity of his, is how he converses and how women see him. So he recognizes the beauty, but it's numbing to him. It's meaningless to him. The beauty isn't able to, you know, enter, and he's not really to, you know, recognize or like really feel its beauty, to become overwhelmed by it, because he doesn't have a woman on his side. He can't bounce its beauty. It can't be refracted off this woman, then which will allow it to enter into him, right? Because he's so alone, so therefore everything becomes meaningless, and he's almost nihilistic. So let us go through half-certain deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. So now we have the imagery. You have romantic imagery also contrasted with this seedy, dodgy, disreputable part of town. That almost, and that is also, the very much the setting of the modern world where people go to for entertainment, but also to engage, to partake in the social game, right? Exchanging pleasantries, meeting new people, talking about Michelangelo to appear cultured. Sawdust one-night cheap hotels, sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. This isn't exactly in a very reputable part of town, an upscale part of town, but quite the opposite. You're sort of located in the underbelly of society. And sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Old-time restaurants used to line the floors with sawdust, which made it easier for cleanup. So there's all this dirt and grime collecting on the ground that one must walk through upon entering. Their shoes, and bridges get coated in this grime. And it could also be that Prufrock is collecting this grime mentally by being in these places. Okay, so, and the modern man as well is collecting this grime, which is also, precipitating this existential crisis that he faces. So these streets take on, they're almost personified. You have the personification of these streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. So streets that have their own consciousness and their own intent they're described as their pattern almost follows a tedious argument of insidious intent. An argument, that's all over the place and is total chaos. So these streets are almost like a labyrinth, designed to confuse people, designed to get people to stay within their coffers for as long as possible. Obviously, the longer you stay, the more money you spend. But this is a seedy, dodgy part of town where people get stuck, right? Or, keep returning to. A labyrinth. So it leads you to an overwhelming question. This is set up, the whole poem, it's a dramatic monologue. And in the beginning, he's also inviting us, the reader, and perhaps also inviting this woman, perhaps. You can interpret it many different ways. He's inviting this reader, this woman, along this journey, to partake in this journey with him. And all of this monologue leads to an overwhelming question. But then he stops us and he stops the woman, "Do not ask me what is it. Do not ask what is it. Let us go first. Let us go and make our visit. Let us go, let me go and try to break through this superficial social dance that where people exchange pleasantries, so I can maybe meet some people and have an intellectually stimulating conversation. Maybe I can meet a woman and she'll agree to go out with me the following night. Maybe she'll accompany back to my residence, right? So it's an invitation in this first stanza to follow him along his contemplation, to follow Prufrock in his meddling and contemplation. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Michelangelo, the famous painter, artist, genius of the Renaissance, right? And he notices woman passing by, and this is a refrain in the poem. It appears again, okay? And he sees these women, and what are they doing? They're talking of Michelangelo as they pass by. They're very much, fascinated, or like very much transfixed on partaking in the social game, and attempting to appear cultured, and to appear learned. And also what this does is, Prufrock hears this, and he doesn't think he can ever aspire to be as great as Michelangelo. What this invokes is, you have, like, this invokes the quote from Teddy Roosevelt, comparison being the thief of joy. And Prufrock looks at hears Michelangelo's name again and again, knowing he'll never be as great as him. Perhaps he had potential, but he can't act on it. He's too afraid. He's too filled with too much cowardice and anxiety about himself and about how others will perceive him. So he never acts. And so comparison steals any joy and any motivation he has to do so. And then the next stanza. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. So here you have zoomorphism, right? The ascribing of animal-like qualities to this yellow fog, this yellow smoke. So this yellow fog takes on like a cat, right? And a cat could also be representative of a metaphor for the feminine. These women that stand around and linger, but also it could represent Prufrock, standing around and lingering and existing on the periphery of society, society's edge, but never in the middle where things are actually happening, but always as a silent, isolated observer. And so, he lingers, Prufrock lingers in the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. He also says, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. So he sesses out at the corner where he plans on settling, and that's where he'll stay for the remainder of the night, potentially. And it says, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys. So yet again, Prufrock is Eliot is building up the setting, is painting the setting for us. We have, like I said, a disreputable part of town, dreary, the underbelly of society, this chaotic scene, dark, damp, right? But also lively. But something Prufrock can only take feelings of insecurity from. Slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. So the only escape from this, the only escape from his malaise, right, is to go to sleep, is to, the only escape from him ruminating all night is to go home and fall asleep, okay? for Prufrock. That's the only thing that will provide any escape. So the next stanza. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, in time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. So the first line of this stanza, and indeed there will be time. This is a reference to Andrew Marvell's poem, who is a metaphysical poet of the past. As I said, this is metaphysical poetry, and the metaphysical poets serve as a big inspiration for Eliot. But you have Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress being referenced, in which he says, had we but world enough and time. So in this poem, To His Coy Mistress, Marvell he assumes that he takes on this hypothetical situation in which he has all the time. If he had all the time in the world, he tells us how he would go about courting his mistress. This girl that he loves. So it's a poem that deals with love and the passing of time. And metaphysical poetry deals with these great outrageous comparisons, as well as irony and wit. And you see this in Eliot's poetry, irony and wit, and also these outrageous comparisons from time to time, like a cat representing the smoke, right? Or the smoke being ascribed this animal-like quality, right? And so Prufrock is feeding himself these lies, this lie over and over. There will be time, there will be time. It becomes a refrain itself. There will be time, there will be time. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create. So essentially, there will be time for his potential to manifest into talent, right? The procrastinator's famous line, why do today what you can put off until tomorrow? I certainly tell myself all this time, or I tell myself this all the time when working on papers for school. I have since graduated, but I used to tell myself this all the time, ask for extensions, etc. But of course there's not time. So, and by saying different things that, there will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There's time to perhaps become a politician. And you think of a politician preparing themselves to go meet different faces, shake different hands, kiss different babies, right? Don't know why they always have to insist on holding a baby and kissing it, but that's pretty common. That's a common trope, right? When you think about politicians meeting people, or a common image, rather. So, and there will be time to murder and create, time to engage in philosophical pursuits, time to murder old ideology for new ones to propagate and to shape your worldview. But of course, the thing is with potential, kids have all the potential in the world. That's, how we hold kids in that type of light. That they have all that we tell them. They have all the potential in the world. You can become a doctor, a lawyer, an astronaut, the next president of the free world. The thing is, when you grow older, you have to pick one of these pursuits. And in picking, of course, you can't be all those different things, at least not at once. Maybe a genius across their lifetime, they can be multiple different things. But most people, they're going to pick a craft, they're going to pick a profession, and they're going to stick with it. And they're going to dedicate their lives. And in the training period, it is certainly narrowing. And that's scary. That's very scary. It's narrowing and constricting. But then, as you learn the craft, as you learn the profession, as you're trained, but then you come out the other end, and it opens so many doors for you. You know, perhaps as a doctor, you can help so many different people, and you can open up your own practice, and you can hire many people, and you network through this, and you meet new people, and people expose you to different things. Of course, and that wouldn't have been possible. And even though at the potential stage, at the beginning stage, before you pick the profession, you had all these different opportunities to be a doctor or a lawyer, but of course you have to pick one. And you have to go through this constricting training period until you can come out the other end. Prufrock is not willing to do that. Rather, he's going to feed himself this lie that makes himself feel better because he knows in the back of his mind there isn't time. There isn't. As he soon in the next stanza actually contradicts himself by alluding to his aging appearance. So yeah, as I said, and time for all the works and days of hands. This is an allusion to works and days. It's a poem about the farming year by a Greek poet Hesiod, I believe, of 8th century BCE. Eliot, and the footnote here in my book says, Eliot contrasts useful agriculture labor with the futile works and days of hands, engaged in meaningless social gesturing. Right? I guess because the following, so you have this useful agriculture alluded to in this line, where he says, and time for all the works and days of hands, but then it says that lift and drop a question on your plate. So perhaps that's Prufrock telling us what can be meaningful in this modern world. And in Candide, right, which was written way before this by Voltaire, in the end of Candide, he goes around, he's taught by his master Pangloss that Westphalia is the best of all possible worlds, or at least he's taught about the best of all possible worlds, and he's taught to remain optimistic even in suffering, even as Pangloss catches syphilis and is thrown, I think they're thrown like shit, excrement is thrown onto Candide potentially at some point, and there's all this suffering and people die and war breaks out and Pangloss is hung, I think, and he witnesses all this horrible stuff, right, in supposedly the best of all possible worlds, that Earth is the best of all possible worlds. That's what Pangloss is suggesting, I think. And the only place, El Dorado maybe, the only place that is actually representative of this utopia that Pangloss is alluding to is a place in Central or South America. I think it's El Dorado. You'd have to check, right? A quick Google search will tell you. It's totally fictitious. It's the only place that is completely fictitious in the entire novella. And it's rubies and gemstones line the soil, and everyone's super nice, and they even allow Candide to leave when he wants, and they allow him to take some of the soil with him, which is, of course, translates to currency in the rest of the world. But it's totally fictitious. And at the end of the novella, Candide, distraught, disheartened, meets a peasant who suggests to, put your head down and to harvest your garden, to engage in labor, tactile labor that is going to prove fruitful, not only literally, but metaphorically. And so Candide decides to harvest his garden. And perhaps that's what Prufrock's telling us here. Harvest your garden, engage in labor, and maybe that will bring about meaning. But it doesn't seem like Prufrock's even willing to undergo the constricting training part to do that, okay? Sorry to digress, right? It's not perfume that's making me digress. It's my own attempt to appear read, right? Literate, well read. My own ego, right? Feeding my own ego. Sorry, I lost myself there. So there's all this time to be all these different things, but of course there's not. Time for you and time for me, and time for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. There we have the social gesturing at the end. I guess no matter what you do, you're going to have to partake in this superficial social gesturing. And I know, for myself, sometimes you can really feel the shallowness in places where social gesturing and talking of Michelangelo to appear cultured is really disenchanting. And certainly can just make you feel cynical about the whole setting, the whole environment of such places. There's time to become an author, I guess he's saying. Time for 100 visions and revisions and 100 indecisions. Okay, and then you have the refrain. In the room the women come and go talking of Michelangelo. Again, as I said, you're going to see this refrain because it's going to appear again and again. Which brings about the same intrusive thoughts for Prufrock. The same seeing people and assuming their thoughts about him when in reality they're probably not even seeing him, as we'll see in the next stanza. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin, my morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. And indeed there will be time, still feeding himself this same lie that there's time to be all these different things, or to court a woman potentially. However, time to turn back and descend the stair. This made me think of, he has a motivation. He's going up the stairs because he says he turns back. So he's going up the stairs. Perhaps he has the motivation. He has a glimmer of hope that, makes him take on this confidence, right? But then indecision and just the complexities of navigating these pleasantries and this social dance and trying to learn the social dance from scratch or, without rhythm. He doesn't have a rhythmic bone in his entire body. So how could he learn the social dance? You have him turn back and descend the stair. Perhaps he's about to alleviate, find some type of solace, and he's about to make it out, but then he turns back and he descends the stair. He turns back and descends back into hell, descends back into a prison of the mind, into contemplation, purposeless contemplation. With a bald spot in the middle of my hair, they will say how his hair is growing thin, my morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin. There he's alluding to his aging appearance. So he immediately contradicts himself. He's saying there will be time, even though he's beginning to bald. He's beginning to go bald. And they will say, now he's assuming people's thoughts about him. They will say how his hair is growing thin. And Seneca tells us, the ancient Greek philosopher of Stoicism, or a Stoic, I think, philosopher, I believe that's right, tells us we suffer more in our own imagination than we ever do in reality. And so by assuming the thoughts of others and assuming that is what they're thinking about us, it sort of just continues to just disintegrate and waste away a Prufrock's character. This is a very neurotic man, a neurotic disposition, which dissipates, causes the dissipation of his character, leading to indecision and just almost depression or anxiety, right? My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. So they will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. So even if he dons an elegant look, right? Even if he dons all this stuff, conservatively clad evening wear, right? A necktie rich and modest, mounted, but asserted by a simple pin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin. So even in his attempt to appear elegant, the superficial nature of this social dance is going to cause these women, it's essentially breeding these snarling women that just scowl at him and can only recognize what's on the outside, and they only see his aging appearance. But of course, this is a monologue. These are Prufrock's thoughts. This isn't in reality what's actually happening, and that's what's damning him to a meaningless existence, right? So after all this, he says, do I dare disturb the universe in a minute? He asks the question, do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. So that is something that could be taken as the central question of this, that he tells us not to ask, that he tells us and the woman not to ask in the first stanza. Do you dare say anything meaningful? Do you dare bite the matter off with a smile and try to interject? Or are you going to continue to be bogged down by contemplation, by your own intrusive thoughts? All right. So I think we're just going from there to move along to the next stanza. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I have known the voices dying with the dying fall, beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? How should I begin to answer this question? There's a million different ways to answer this question. The thing is, there's no right answer, and Prufrock doesn't realize this. Or maybe he does, but it's not enough to drive him to action. He's known them all. This speaks to the mundane, and I wrote something down. He's known them all already, known them all. The evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I love that line, right? So this is mundane, meticulously planned. No variation, no purposeful vocation or fervent revelation. Frivolous contemplation castrates, precipitating an almost catatonic state. The proof is in the pebble that threatens to sink the ship. Imaginary insults never fail to miss, right? So this speaks to the routinized life, very routine, very mundane. And this is, just brings on this, like I said, cynicism. I know the voices dying with the dying fall. This is an allusion to Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. The speaker is, I wrote it down, the pronunciation. Orsino. And Orsino is, he may be analogous to Prufrock, because he is somebody obsessed with love, and he is obsessed with, I think, his neighbor Olivia, but he'd rather indulge in this rich fantasy life instead of like any type of meaningful relationship, right? Pursuing a genuine connection with somebody. And that's very much like Prufrock, but this also alludes to death, because in this line from the Twelfth Night, Orsino, if my pronunciation's off, I already forgot it, but he hears the voices dying with a dying fall. He hears these stringed instruments dying off, and Prufrock hears the voices, the women talking of Michelangelo as they pass. He hears them until he doesn't, and they fade away. And this is also representative of, of death, that there won't be time for Prufrock to drive the moment to its crisis. And so Eliot, his poetry is very elusive. It's suggestive. You have a concrete image, the voices dying with the dying fall, but this could also mean so many different things, right? Like I said, this can be a metaphor for death. So after all this, how should I begin? After seeing and hearing this, how should I begin? Like I said, there's no right answer. And the next stanza, we're at line 55 now. And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin? To spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? So when he is bogged down by contemplation and by his own insecurities, these eyes that fix him, right, in which he feels like he's sprawling on a pin, these women's eyes that follow him and cast judgment, how should he begin after that? Can he get past his own insecurities and his own perception of their thoughts about him? And what's the right way to begin after that? And is it worth it, right? Should he spit out all the butt ends of his days and ways? Should this monologue exist? Is it going to provide a catharsis? Or are people just going to misunderstand him and misconstrue his words? He's also been cooped up. It seems like he's been cooped up. So I think to begin, he probably would just digress and just spit all the butt ends of his days and ways, talk about his idiosyncrasies, and talk about how his days unfold. And after all this, is it enough, or are people just going to misunderstand him, or women just going to misunderstand him? The next stanza. I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl. And how should I then presume, and how should I begin? So you have the imagery that, is representative of women, or this woman that is braceleted and, arms that are white and bare, and but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. So he sees these women. They're a source of insecurity for him. And also their seduction, their attractiveness. Is it the perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Is it, their seductive nature that throws my thoughts into a frenzy? And after this frenzy, after this inner turmoil, how can I begin after that? He doesn't know. So he never begins, right? And so the next stanza. Shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. So more of the same. He's seen these streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent where lonely men get stuck in their coffers and never escape, only engaging in pleasantries but never interjecting and having a intellectually stimulating conversation. It's all not worth it, and therefore he believes he should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. This is an allusion to Hamlet, and I believe you have Hamlet talking to Polonius, telling Polonius that if he crawled backwards, if he aged backwards, if like a crab, who crawls backwards, if he would have aged in that direction, aged backwards like Benjamin Button, right? Then they would be the same age. Again, and you have further allusions to Hamlet. Again, you have Prufrock comparing himself to a character from literature that is not the central character. Or if he is, he's a depressing, contemplative one, right? Who ruminates and who sort of meddling around, but is not the primary focus. He's obtuse and awkward, as he later tells us. So he would have been better off, without human consciousness. He already exists at the subconscious level because he's thinking all the time. He already exists in this subterranean domain, this subterranean level of his mind, and therefore he should exist at the subterranean depths of the ocean, where human consciousness doesn't exist and ignorance is bliss, right? And a crustacean knows its place in the ecosystem. It doesn't have to be told what to do. It just knows what to do. So the next stanza. In the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. So, in the afternoons, again, you have contrast. In the afternoons, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers. So as long as he's asleep, this romantic imagery of being asleep, the evenings being asleep, and winding down and, bringing about a calm nature with them. But there's a whole set of people that are still awake, and as they stay up longer and longer, they malinger and, perhaps they become tireless or restless and I don't know, whatever adjective you want to use to fill that in, right? But also you have sleep that provides an escape for Prufrock, in which he could either sleep and escape his seemingly meaningless existence, or he could go out and observe and try to interject, although he knows he probably won't. And if he does go out, right, should I, after the tea, cakes, and ices, after, like ascribing, following the social parameters and signing his name on the social contract? Should I, after tea, having these cultural products that, like I said, are very much fixtures of the social game that mean when you're drinking them, you are a willing participant in this game? Should he, after drinking the tea and having the cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? Will this provide him the window of opportunity, the confidence to drive the moment to its crisis? And though he says, but though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, though he has wept, and prayed, and let me see my notes here. Though he has self-deprecated, right, and loathed and lamented about himself, right, and though he recognizes his own neurotic disposition, and he recognizes his aging appearance and how meaningless it is to exist in a prison of the mind, to exist only talking to oneself, only having a monologue, but never a conversation. And though now here's a reference to John the Baptist. Though I have seen my head grown slightly bald, which is in parentheses, which tells us this is, his head. But then it says brought in upon a platter, right? Or he has to remind himself anytime he thinks of his head that, and the parentheses are almost like the intrusive thought that, that is interjected at any given point in time, anytime he thinks of himself or he regards himself. He can't think about his intellect or any redeeming quality. Rather, it's about his aging appearance. And it's the lack of action across time, that he thinks about so often. And John the Baptist was a precursor to Christ, and he was beheaded, right? So, though inaction is severing, further inaction is severing his ability to interact with others, and is further introducing like a lack of communication and trouble communicating, right? And though he has wept about this, he still cannot act, right? Or he says he doesn't feel important enough to act. He tells us, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. He's not John the Baptist. He's not Lazarus. Rather, he has seen the eternal footman. He tells us, I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker. So perhaps, the moment to be great has come, but it has passed. And he didn't actualize any potential. Perhaps there was a potential to be great. There was a potential for the women to talk about him instead of Michelangelo, but the greatness flickered. The light shone, and then the light went out, right? The lamp was broke. As that's the way potential works. I have seen the eternal footman. He has seen hold my coat and snicker. And in short, I was afraid. So he has seen this, the eternal social hierarchy that casts judgment. It snickers at him. It shoos him away. And in short, he was afraid. Cowardice rules Prufrock. Cowardice lords over Prufrock. It subjugates him to a meaningless existence. Next stanza. And would it have been worth it, after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it toward some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all. if one settling a pillow by her head should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. So, again, after these pleasantries, after, dancing, the social dance, could he have bitten off the matter with a smile? Could he have squeezed the universe into a ball? This is another reference to Marvell's coy mistress. And, sometimes when you're interjecting or perhaps you're trying to tell your crush, that you love her or you love him. And it feels in that moment like the universe, the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Should he have the strength to, under this weight, to carry this weight on his back as he asks the question or answers the question? And, of course, there is the possibility of being misunderstood when he answers her question. But you have to deal with that. And you have to deal with those ramifications of being misunderstood. Potential ramifications of being misunderstood if you want to court somebody or get to know somebody even, right? And he's saying he's not Lazarus. He doesn't feel like the main character in this world. Women don't talk about him, like I said. They talk about Michelangelo. To say I am Lazarus, come from the dead. He is no Lazarus. Of course, Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead. Come back to tell you all. Instead, he's not Lazarus. But would it have been worthwhile to answer her question if the woman who is laying beside him should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. Would the failure be too much? Should he just keep quiet? So the next stanza, and we're at line 99. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets and the novels and the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor and this and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen. Would it have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. Again, more painting of the setting of these cultural products and these props that are commonplace, and this romantic imagery, only to be misunderstood, right? So again, that you have a refrain. So there's many refrains in this poem. The refrain, being, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. That's not what I meant to ask you, Prufrock. Just answer the question. How was your day? You don't have to tell me your whole, history. But the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of failure is too much for Prufrock. And I apologize if I repeat myself, but of course Prufrock repeats himself. And he wishes, and even if a magic lantern could throw his nerves and patterns on a screen, could they be decoded? Even if that could, would women know what they're seeing? Would women be able to piece together in this that he just wants to get to know them? Or would they just be too concerned with, attempting to appear cultured and meeting somebody who can open the next door for them in life, right? So then the next stanza. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. Am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt an easy tool. Differential, glad to be of use. Politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse. At times, indeed, almost ridiculous. Almost, at times, the fool. So He's saying he's not Prince Hamlet. Instead, he's like Polonius, who meddles in people's business, who spies, who silently observes. You know, he can swell a progress, start a scene or two. He can be a side character, but he's not Prince Hamlet, right? He's differential, glad to be of use. He's a tool in this game. You know, maybe he's the bridge that women use to meet Hamlet, but he's not Hamlet himself, nor will ever be. He's full of high sentence. He talks a lot. Perhaps he's educated, and he sounds astute, but he's a bit awkward, and he takes himself too seriously. So at times he appears as the fool. So perhaps because of this, he'd rather just keep quiet. He can't afford to laugh at himself. Like you can't take yourself so seriously, Prufrock. So the next stanza, I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. He's telling us, again, contemplation in its cyclical nature invites intrusive thoughts, and he recognizes he grows old, and he's trying to act his age, and he wears his trousers, the bottoms of his trousers rolled, right? So Dostoevsky tells us that contemplation without a purpose it can be very damaging, and can almost be like the erasure of self, right? These aren't actually thoughts because they never go anywhere. They never exist within conversation, but only exist as contemplation. And Smerdyakov is very much like this. So we have Prufrock almost being like Smerdyakov from the Brothers Karamazov, who contemplates and ruminates, but never has a conversation with him, becomes resentful and sly and scheming, right? So the next stanza. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. It's funny because even in his fantasies, where he's engaging these mermaids, he doesn't even think in his fantasy the mermaids will have a conversation with him, right? But shall I act my age and part my hair behind? Do I dare eat a peach? Peach is also suggestive of, it invokes, you have the concrete image of a peach, eating a peach, but you have the suggestive nature, which a peach obviously can be representative of a woman. And certainly in today's time, certain woman's, or the body part of a woman, right? A certain body part of belonging to a woman, if you know what I mean. So, does he dare eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they will sing to me. So, he's heard mermaids singing, but they won't sing to him. Like I said, even in his fantasies, they won't sing to him. So here's the next stanza, which almost provides like a reprieve, right? A sanctuary for Prufrock. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black. So now he's engaging in this rich fantasy life because this is the only place that allows Prufrock to escape from his aging appearance, his own insecurities, and the snickering of the eternal footman, right? The snickering and judgment of the social hierarchy in which he's at the very bottom, or at least feels feels that way. He's more so the foundation on which the social hierarchy stands, and he's existing at the bedrock level. You know, Prufrock, it almost feels as though Prufrock has been castrated by a series of intrusive thoughts, and he's walking around with his nuts in his back pocket trying to find somebody to sew them on for him. And maybe in doing so, he'll regain some masculinity and a sense of importance. But, you know, the question of asking somebody to sew them on is just too much, right? It's too awkward of a question. It's too awkward to break down his idiosyncrasies. And it's too superficial to engage in the social dance. But like I said, you have this reprieve, this sense of a reprieve here, where he's engaging these mermaids. You know, and you have very imaginative imagery of mermaids combing the white hair of the waves blown back. So they're riding the waves, and he sees them in his imagination, and you know, he wants nothing more than to ride the waves with them. So the next stanza, which is the closing stanza. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. I love how that ends, right? So we have lingered in the chambers of the sea, we have lingered in my subconscious, in my fantasy, and we have existed there for so long. And I have seen these sea girls. I have existed in the sea caves with them, and they're wearing seaweed red and brown. They're alive. They're very real. Seaweed is representative of life. Okay? But then, of course, human voices wake us, and we drown. You think of waking. When you wake up in the morning, you're alive. That's another day to be alive. But instead, waking is the point in which Prufrock feels as though that's when the existential dread hits him. When human voices knock on the door and say, hey, you got to live in reality. You can't spend all your time, you know, trying to court and have a sexual relationship with mermaids, right? You have to, at some point, come and join us in the real world. But that's exactly where Prufrock hates to be. And it's almost as though he's vexed to nightmare upon waking. And that concludes the poem. I certainly like this poem. It's hard to analyze it without repeating yourself. Hopefully I broke down some of the illusions for you. But certainly the underlying message here, once you get past the illusions and, like I said, this intellectual webbing that sort of shrouds the poem in a type of secrecy, that shrouds this confession in a type of intellectual secrecy, you know, but you don't have to be in Mensa to read this and to understand it. Certainly not. There's an underlying message here of, you know, loneliness and trying what it's like, the fear of trying to find love in the modern world, and, you know, the battle against oneself in trying to carve out a meaningful existence. So there's a very human underlying message. There's a very human underlying message that exists separate from all the intellectual fluff that is sprinkled throughout. So I hope you liked my rant and analysis of T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And thanks. Yeah, more rants on the way.